want to talk about M112 and M113 engine motor mounts. Common failure item at 120 to 150,000 miles, just because they're filled with a liquid. And when that liquid leaks out, you suddenly don't have much of a motor mount. I know on this E500 that I have to replace the motor mounts because of the vibration at idle. I can just feel it. But there's a couple other clues, and I want to show them to you right now. I'm going to remove this panel that is right underneath the mounts. If you are removing this panel for any reason and you see wetness like right there, you're thinking, well, where's that coming from? Look at all this, kind of almost looks like rusty water. And you're saying, well, gee, there's no coolant leak over here. But this is a good indication that the motor mounts are leaking fluid, and this is the, one of the first indications that you're going to have a failure and you're going to have to replace it. Let's get under the car now and take a close look at what those look like, and we might even be able to see. Yeah, look at this. Look at all this stuff. It all looks like rusty water. Comes right up all around the motor mount. The motor mount is right here, and it's got this soft cover over it. But we pull this back, you can't see much. So the indicators are, for these motor mounts, you need to replace them that are leaking, or you just have way too much vibration at idle and not much rock in the engine compartment when you try to move the engine side to side. Now when I start rocking it, the engine should move maybe an inch or so side to side. If the whole car moves, I can guarantee you that you're going to need new motor mounts. Okay, let's see that. Look at that. It doesn't, I got maybe just a quarter of an inch. But this engine right here is sitting in this engine bay without any shock mounting at all. Take a look at this. We just pulled this motor mount out of an E500. You're thinking, well, it looks a little bad right here. That's not just bad, that's terrible. Watch what it looks like when you compare it with a new mount. Look at the difference in height. Look at how this is totally collapsed. All the fluid has leaked out of it. The rubber shot. So if you're wondering why your M112 or M113 vibrates so much when you start it up or you're sitting at a stop, this is probably the reason right here. You have no cushioning at all when the mounts end up looking like this. There's quite a number of videos and there's forum posts on the internet about changing these motor mounts in the M112 and M113 engines. And basically, people will tell you, oh, you got to, get the car up in the air. You got to, loosen up the top of the mount and the bottom of the mount, and jack the engine up and just pull the old mount out, put the new mount in, bolt everything back up and lower this down. And that's true, but there are some pitfalls, and one of them is where and how do you jack up the engine? This is an aluminum pan. If you crack this pan, you have a huge big wrench dent. You'll have to pull the whole engine out of the car. So look what I've done here. I've cut this special 2x6 to give me full width support on the bottom of the pan, and then where that dimple drops down, I've drilled a hole in the wood. So I have really good support on this jack, and you can see as I jack it up, it's nice and smooth. So once you get the jack situation where you want it, the next thing is getting up on top of these mounts above the engine arm and getting those two bolts out. It's not straight on. It's very difficult. There's not enough room to get a socket. You basically have to have a box wrench, and that's where it really gets interesting. So here's what this looks like on top of the motor mount arm, and you're looking at this, that shouldn't be a problem, just get a socket. Well, there's not enough room to get a socket and a ratchet up in there, and you might be thinking, well, I'll just get a box end. Here's the problem with the box end. You've got to get some movement here and some travel, and once you get the box wrench on and come over into here, it's really hard to get it on enough so it grabs that nut. So Joyce and I, we decided to make a special tool. Here's a special tool so you can see the depth on this, and you can get this on that nut, and you've got much more travel. Now it's short. You have to have a short wrench because you don't have a lot of movement up in there. So what we do is we put this wrench in place, get it right where we want it, where we can get a pry bar, and you end up prying against the handle to break it loose. Now it's very tedious to get this off, just going back and forth with this special wrench. I said earlier that this was an 18 millimeter. It's not, it's 16 millimeter. But if you have a ratcheting 17 millimeter, it will work, see? It's loose, but you're going to be able to get up in there and finish getting this bolt the rest of the way off very quickly if you use that wrench there. But getting it loose, sometimes you need something with some depth like this. We just finished installing these new motor mounts in this E500. I was telling Jerson, hey, they said on the internet that this was an easy job. Just jack the engine up, take the old mounts off, and put the new ones on. And we have Jerson's wisdom of the day.
Well, nothing is easy. Only easy thing is when you do it with your mouth. But other than that, it's very hard. See, you have to think about what you're going to do. Pushing hard, straight this out, working hard, try to alignment, you know, to not cross the thread over the bolt. So you have to have a little skill.
The new motor mounts are in and torqued. That took a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be because of this situation with the interference of the steering rack. So this may not be the case on other engines with these type of motor mounts, but we have rebolted up the steering rack and we're done. But I just want to admonish you, if you're doing the motor mounts, and I can guarantee you we're going to feel an amazing difference when we start this engine up. But I think if you do this, you also want to do that rear transmission mount. This one looks pretty good, but these are not expensive and they're very easy to install, so just do it. In fact, I think this job is so easy, I really don't need to do a full video on it. I'll just point out a few things that you want to be careful about. Number one is jacking up the transmission. Don't jack it up in the middle of the pan. Get back by this rear edge. Use a wide block so you can distribute the load, because you're going to have to raise the transmission up a little bit to drop this cross member. And that requires taking these 6 bolts out, taking the 2 bolts underneath here for the mount, drop that down, replace the mount, and put everything back together. So it's probably one of the most easy DIY jobs as far as doing something under the car. The hard part is getting under the car. But I recommend, if you don't have a lift, use 4 ramps. It's safer than jack stands, and you'll have plenty of room to get under the car to do this job. Well, you remember I said this looked pretty good before I removed it. And I think this is a prime example of why you don't always want to just go by a visual inspection when it comes to rubber parts. Because I'm going to bring the new one in like this, and we're going to turn it just like that. Look at the difference. That's probably collapsed more than 1/4 of an inch. And that's what happens over time. The rubber in this center section just starts to collapse, and eventually it'll collapse all the way to the bottom. This one, you know, still got a little bit of shock to it, but I want to tell you, this is not an expensive part. If you don't have any record of that rear transmission mount being replaced, just replace it.